Hi, everybody. This is Laurie Handlers, and you're listening to an episode of Sex and Happiness, a show about your sex and your happiness. And today will be no disappointment. Today will be more towards your sexiness and your happiness. As always, my guest today is Orla Quinn. As an Irish shamanic practitioner and sacred sexuality coach, she works with expanded energies to help people source their sexual sovereignty so that they can live to their full creative potential and self-sourced love. Orla leads individuals and groups back to their soul truth. She inspires them to follow their soul purpose and to ultimately walk the high path of love as service to others. So welcome to my show today, Orla. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. And
Yeah.
hello to all your viewers, listeners.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's great to have you. And today we're going to talk about conscious sexuality. Like, what does that mean? Why does that mean? But before we get to that, how did you get here? How did you become somebody interested in conscious sexuality? How did you get a shamanic path? How did you find out about sexual sovereignty? Most people didn't grow up knowing they were going to be this.
No, and I certainly didn't. In fact, I grew up in quite the opposite. I grew up in a very Catholic, conservative background in Northern Ireland, at the backdrop of the Troubles conflict zone. So my reality was far from the reality of conscious sexuality. It was a long path of awakening. It was a soul searching one. I've always followed the truth, so that was always my compass. I guess that's what brought me onto the path. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, that must have been something. Growing up in Northern Ireland during most of that conflict just must have been scary, traumatic, and all kinds of things. So I'm glad you found your way out.
Yeah, Laurie. I think it gave a certain backdrop to. I suppose you don't realize that you're in these kind of traumatic situations until you get out of them, right? And it was only until I was much older, when I was 18, and actually a bit older, because I went to college. I went to college in Belfast as well, so it was still in Northern Ireland. So really only after I left college and started to spread my wings and go abroad that I realized actually there's a whole different reality out there. And my norm, the norm I had growing up, was not most people's norm. And I suppose my norm would have been one of high stress, that the freeze, fight or flight,
yes,
kind of, with the nervous system. In these kind of conflict zones, you don't realize actually how highly strung you actually are, how much you are on high alert all the time. That is your norm. So it's really until you come outside of these situations that you realize how different you actually are from most people. So yeah, that has been a process of very much healing of the nervous system, right? So really coming into full embodiment of my this, almost like a new embodiment, right? So changing those old programs, those old beliefs, certainly that old state of fear and alert, into one of peace, calm, and love.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Process.
wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. I wish that for everybody else in war-torn and conflict-ridden climates and places, for sure. And I imagine that coming into conscious sexuality helped. That's a big embodiment piece. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did you stumble upon conscious sexuality or seek conscious sexuality? How did your your radar or they call it teleological mechanism, something that eliminates things and searches out other things. So how did your mechanism search out conscious sexuality?
Yeah, well, it goes back to what I was saying before about my
Mm-hmm.
compass being my truth. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always had a very clear insight as to what I'm supposed to do. I started off as a teacher. I qualified as a teacher. Thought I wanted to teach. So I went through that training, and I practiced for many years until I got disillusioned. I became disillusioned by the kind of the curriculum, the institutions that I was teaching in. I knew there was a higher truth for me out there. That's when I started a new career in international development, and I went abroad, and I became interested in human rights, and I worked in that area of human rights, educating people and helping people to become advocates for human rights. And again, I thought, this is my higher truth. This is my passion, right? This is what I'm here to do. Again, I became disillusioned. I became disillusioned with the sector that I was working in, and knowing that's not the ultimate truth. There's more to seek. There's more to seek out there. And I suppose that's what started. This was around 2012, and I was starting to get downloads. That's when my ethereal body started to come in, and I thought I was being possessed. I was scared. I was really scared. I couldn't really make sense of any of this, because my world was academia. My world was mental. So sort of having these altered states of embodiment scared the hell out of me. I didn't know how to manage it, and those around me that I was asking couldn't really help me, couldn't really explain it. So I went to Peru. I quit my job. My body was starting to change, and that caused sickness. And so I had to leave my full-time employment. Like, I had to actually leave my career. And I went to Peru. I went to the Sacred Valley in Peru, and I spent a long time in Peru. I could say, going on that soul path of finding, the truth of who I am and what I'm here, and that being the soul truth. I mean, like, the soul truth of who I am, and not the learned version of me, but the actual soul side of me, the soul part of me, the soul truth of me, of what I'm here to do. And that's the shamanic. That was the shamanic path. That eventually then, it was the going into the depths, right? So letting go of a lot of the ego, a lot of the mental constructs that I had established in my career, spanning over, almost 15 years, letting go of that old Orla, that old version of Orla, and sort of coming into this new being that was very much destined to do this work. And so it was a long path of transformation, a very difficult path of transformation. It didn't happen overnight. It took many years to really establish, and it was the shamanic path that brought me to conscious sexuality. It brought me actually to the gates of Ista, where I ultimately met you, Laurie. But Ista, being the Institute of Temple Arts, and because Ista works in the shamanic realm, it was a very natural path for me. It was almost, I knew why I sought that out, because that was the path I had worked on. I'd come from that path of shamanic techniques, shamanic practices, shamanic methods, to really do that self-discovery work. So Ista was like my home from home.
Yeah. I see how it all fits together now. I mean, I didn't know all this, so it makes perfect sense that you would find your way to sacred sexuality, and connect shamanism with sexuality, with spirituality, I mean, the same way that Ista has. So now you are planning and executing a conscious sexuality summit. And I imagine this all comes out of the work that you did in Peru and then the work that you did at ISTA and so on. It's like, it's, you're culminating things. You're bringing things together in a culmination of all of this. So tell us a little bit about the creation of the summit, and then we'll have a little break, and then we'll come back and we'll find out more details about you and the things you're focusing on. So what's the Conscious Sexuality Summit?
Okay, so the Conscious Sexuality Summit is being launched. It's currently it's currently in that planning stage, right? I'm recording, and it's being launched in June. Be launched on the 21st of June.
June, and that's, I'm putting the date in 2019 because sometimes people listen to these podcasts much later than the year or they listen to them again. So June 21st, 2019.
Yeah, right. So it's going to go live on the 21st. It will be on my website, thereafter. So even if your viewers miss it, or your listeners miss it, they can access it afterwards. Yeah. So my intention was to create a platform where people who are practicing this work, that are doing tantra work, or who are practicing sacred sexuality in their own practice, working with others, working on relationship healing, coaching, particularly in Ireland. I wanted to give them a voice. I wanted to give them a platform to talk about their work. And the main reason to that's one reason, to give them a platform to be able to speak to their work.
Mm-hmm.
But the overall sort of aim was to actually get all of these messages out to the mainstream, because, I don't know in the US, but certainly in Ireland, this topic is still quite fringe. It's still quite marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
And, I feel like those of us who are doing the work have a responsibility to speak about it, just like you're doing so fantastically with your show, Laurie. We have a responsibility to talk about this, and to spread this message that, not just to work in our little pods, but actually to share this message, because I feel society is ready for it. And so it's our responsibility to put the word out there. And certainly in Ireland, I think, well, I know that this is the first of a kind. There has been no summits in Ireland on this topic of conscious sexuality. Well, certainly I don't think sexuality at all. Because a lot of practitioners are just working, in their own areas, and they haven't had a chance to kind of look up and see who else is doing this work, and certainly an opportunity to maybe broadcast what they do, talk about the wisdom that they have and how and why they do the work they do. And so I think this summit is going to serve a real purpose in for Ireland and beyond, just to show people the powerful work that this is, and that, that they can access, given all they need to do is know about it. That's the first step. Right.
The first step is to know that there's something available, and that if they're thinking about it, they're not alone. I mean, for me, it was amazing to teach in Ireland. I feel I was privileged to teach in Ireland twice. And I asked point blank, and at one of the classes, it was probably the class you were in, how many people had suffered sexual abuse, and every single hand went up. I mean, so there's things going on. I don't know if they're all still going on, but there were trespasses against the person without consent. In everybody's background, every hand went up. The only hands that didn't go up was there was a participant from Australia and another participant from England, I think, and one from the US. Those three people's hands didn't go up. Everybody else's hands, in a class of 30 or so, hands went up. So I'm glad you're doing this. I think it's important. It's important to open the conversation so people know that they can heal, and people know that they're not alone, and they don't have to be hiding anymore about trespasses that happen. I mean, that's just one piece of the puzzle. You know, the other pieces of the puzzle is there's joy and freedom and sovereignty to be had from conscious sexuality. Wonderful stuff. But the first part that we have to dig up is the healing piece that needs to take place. And I was flabbergasted. I just, for the hell of it, asked the question, and the hands flew up. And it didn't matter what gender, it didn't matter the age of the people, nothing mattered. It was just like everybody from Ireland raised their hand. So
can I say something about this, Laurie? Because it's you know, the stat is 1 in 4. You know, it's really high. It's extremely high, and it's, you know, and it's a very sad, unique situation in Ireland with regards to this particular, you know, trauma of sexual abuse, and it's all kinds of sexual abuse, but very often it does happen in childhood, and that 1 in 4 is children. So I think it's definitely a particular case in Ireland, and you know, and I don't want to get into there's many reasons for that, right? And it's vast, but I do feel that this is the reason why I titled my my summit not only conscious sexuality and subtitles the truth of the matter, because I do believe what you're saying is, you know, what you're saying about, there's joy, there's happiness, there's, you know, the conscious sexuality route brings so much open-hearted love, but before you get there, you need to heal the trauma,
right.
And this is where we are in Ireland. You know, this is where you know, in terms of the collective, let's just talk about this, the collective consciousness of this society. There's still trauma here from that abuse that has happened over generations, you know, like this is generational.
Yes.
There's a lot of it that's carried in the lineage as well as in, you know, on person. So it's, this is, you know, this is where certainly the campaign, the Me Too campaign, revelations, recent revelations of the abuse that happened in these church institutions in Ireland. These have been, you know, these revelations have been pouring sort of over the last decade in Ireland. So there's been so much truth being spoken. And so it's giving courage to those victims who have their own story that they've been holding on to for far too long. And it's giving them the courage to speak out also, right? And name, you know, seek justice for their abuse.
Yes. All right, well, we're actually gonna take a break here. When we come back, we're gonna really focus on some of the subjects that you're hoping to bring out, aiming to bring out in this summit, and because I don't want to focus on the trauma only, although I think it was important to name it and to speak it. I have a lot of feelings about it, and how it's interwoven into Irish people's personalities. Like there's a way of disempowerment that's happened by being like conquered and divided, not only by a nation, by another country, but also by uprooting the institutions of the very country. So it's very political in nature. And there's so much to say. Let me just say this and then we'll go to break. I just came from Scotland. I was for the first time in Scotland, and I noticed similar patterns there. And I said to my co-facilitator, James, who's Scottish, I said, it doesn't feel as horrific as what's happened in Ireland. And he said, oh, it was just as horrific. It's just that it happened earlier. It's it's longer ago. So what happened in Ireland is more, it's more close. And then I saw some of the same similar patterns of people just not being able to speak their truth or feel themselves or feel empowered when speaking, and needing all kinds of permission to just be. And I would just go, come on, just spit it out. Like, it's okay. There's nobody in this room judging you, you know, like, just get a little more arrogant or something, you know. It's just like but I saw some similar polarities, similar things, similar so it brought me all back to being in Ireland, those few times that I was there. And yeah, so this is good. I'm totally in favor for what you're doing. I'm excited about what you're doing, and I want to like bring this to as many people who will hear it and use it and take it and run with it, you know, and heal themselves.